Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 8 Part 54 based on novel. So let's start. When Ling Qingzhu's words sounded out, she could see the smile on Lindong's face disappear bit by bit, before a frightening gloominess slowly appeared. At the same time, an intensely cold murderous desire also surged. What happened? Lindong asked in a low voice. It seems like the Yuan Gate and Dao Sect disciples met 2 days ago. They ended up in a dispute because of some friction. After that, Yuan Kang and the rest attacked, Ling Qingzhu said. No matter how one looked at it, this matter was likely due to the Yuan Gate's provocations. After all, the Dao Sect disciples were weaker. Moreover, their main pillar of strength, Lindong, was absent. Even if they met Yuan Gate, it was likely that they would give in. Therefore, the reason that things had developed into such a state was most likely the Yuan Gate disciples' intention. After both parties exchanged blows, the Dao Sect disciples have been progressing towards the teleporting formation area while Yuan Gate gave chase. It seems like the latter can no longer control themselves. Did my Dao Sect disciples suffer any injuries or death? Lindong's eyes were dark and chilly as he inquired. Chen Gui is helping Dao Sect disciples. He has temporarily stopped Yuan Kang and is shouldering quite a great deal of pressure. However, it is rumored that some injuries and deaths have still occurred. Ling Qingzhu hesitated for a moment, but finally she did not hide anything. Bang! A brutal and evil aura suddenly surged out from Lindong's body when those words sounded out. His expression had also become exceptionally savage. It appeared as though he could hear the miserable cries from just before those Dao Sect disciples died, as well as the proud arrogant laughter from the Yuan Gate disciples. Those trash! Lindong's body trembled slightly. His expression was ferocious. He knew that this day would arrive sooner or later, but he did not expect that Yuan Gate would be so impatient and begin their attack at such a time. Currently, the Yuan Gate and Dao Sect disciples have been continuously fighting for a couple of days. Should we immediately hurry to the teleportation formation area? Ling Qingzhu softly asked. Lindong nodded. He lifted his head and looked towards the dark north. A scarlet light faintly flickered in his eyes, causing his ferocious face to appear exceptionally frightening. He was currently unaware of the exact number of dead and injured Dao Sect disciples at this moment. However, he knew that if some accident was to occur to Qingtan, Ying Huan, and a few others, he would definitely massacre the Yuan Gate disciples. Not even one will remain. A brutal bloodthirsty aura spread out from Lindong's body. That brutality was even greater than the demons in Unique Devil region. How much time do we need to reach the teleportation formation from here? Lindong asked in a gloomy voice. 5 days. But if we hurry at full speed, we should be able to catch up to them in 3 days. Ling Qingzhu thought for a moment before replying. Let's go. Lindong's body shook slightly, as the green dragon wings extended from his back. Without saying anything more, he flapped his wings, turning into a flash of green light that tore through the darkness and swiftly rushed towards the distant sky at lightning speed. Ling Qingzhu watched Lindong, who was covered all over by a savage aura as he left. Her hand involuntarily tensed, as a trace of worry flashed across the depths of her pupils. Since the beginning of this great sect competition, she was aware that Yuan Gate and Dao Sect would definitely never come to a compromise. Dao Sect had suffered great losses during the last great sect competition. Even the great senior sister of Sky Hall had been surrounded and killed by Yuan Gate. The battle this time around would likely surpass the previous one. In the previous great sect competitions, Yuan Gate would always gain the upper hand in the battle with the Dao Sect disciples. This had also boosted the Yuan Gate disciples' arrogance. However, this time around, it was a little different. In this great sect competition, the Yuan Gate disciples' strength might appear to be stronger than the Dao Sect disciples on the surface, but Dao Sect had Lindong this time. This person was usually good-natured. However, he would immediately turn into a murderous devil if someone touched his sensitive spot. He would become the greatest variable in this great sect competition. If the Yuan Gate was to act recklessly, it was likely that they would have to pay quite a terrifying price this time around. Ling Qingzhu recalled Lindong's ferocious face, which was filled with a savage aura earlier. She was aware that the young man, who was helpless while being chased and attacked by her, was about to explode. It was likely that there would be a bloodbath in this great sect competition. Ling Qingzhu sighed softly. Immediately, she ceased thinking about this matter. A green lotus formed under her feet. After which, she turned into a bright ray of light that quickly chased after Lindong. Two bright rays of light flashed across the dark sky at a shocking speed. The wind pressure from their fast speed shook the ground below, and formed a long scar over it. These two bright rays of light were naturally Lindong and Ling Qingzhu, who had exited the depths of unique devil region. They had already traveled for 2 whole days. The both of them did not even stop and rest for a moment during these 2 days. Green light covered Lindong's body. The green dragon wings on his back would flap occasionally, and his speed would soar greatly. At this moment, his face was still covered with a dark and solemn expression. They had met others who were participating in the great sect competition along the way. Lindong was able to obtain more information about the fight between the Yuan Gate and Dao sect disciples from them. In the battle between the two parties, one party was chasing, while the other was retreating. The ones chasing were naturally the Yuan Gate disciples, and the ones continuously withdrawing were naturally the Dao sect disciples. Clearly, Dao sect was using all of its strength to defend against the continuous chase and ruthless attacks by Yuan Gate. They fought while retreating. Perhaps one should say that they were still bitterly waiting for the return of the person who could truly lead them to victory against Yuan Gate. Lindong, we are about to reach the teleportation formation area. Ling Qingzhu looked into the distance, before turning towards Lindong beside her and commented. Yes. Lindong nodded but did not say anything else. If it was in the past, he might even tease Ling Qingzhu a little. However, he did not have the mood to do so now. Ling Qingzhu also understood Lindong's current state. Therefore, she pondered for a moment, before speaking. I am aware that a fight between you and the disciples of Yuan Gate is unavoidable. However, you should be careful of Yuan Kang. Oh. Lindong's eyes moved. He frowned and looked at Ling Qingzhu before saying, he should be at the initial profound life stage, right? In the current great sect competition, it was likely that there were only 3 people amongst the younger generation who had truly reached the initial profound life stage. They were Yuan Kang, Ling Qingzhu, and Chen Gui. An initial profound life stage expert was indeed extremely difficult to deal with. However, when the time came for them to exchange blows, Lindong would make him pay a price that he would never be able to imagine. Yuan Kang's strength is indeed at the initial profound life stage. However, in order to become the leader of the 3 little kings, he also possessed many tactics. Even I feel a faint sense of danger when facing him. Therefore, he is definitely not as easy to deal with as he appears on the surface. You need to be careful when you end up exchanging blows with him. Ling Qingzhu muttered. Lindong's eyes hardened. Ling Qingzhu's strength was similar to Yuan Kang. However, the latter was able to cause her to feel danger. It seems like this Yuan Kang was not so simple. Many thanks. If you did not accompany me to find the Supreme Purity Celestial Pond, Yuan Gate would have likely not attacked at this time. Ling Qingzhu's eyes had some apology flashing across them. If I was around, they might not have dragged it out for so long. Lindong shook his head. His eyes looked into the distance, as a brutal aura once again rose within them. The reason they are chasing in this manner is likely because they plan on forcing me out. Ha ha, it seems like Yuan Kang already hates me to the core. All right, since you are so anxious to force me to show myself, I shall gladly accompany all of you this time around. However, the stakes that I play with are usually quite high. Let's use our lives as stakes this time. A bloodthirsty savageness climbed onto Lindong's lips. A trace of insanity was vaguely present. Unique Devil Region Teleportation Formation Area. This was a vast land that was filled with rocks. Many mountains of various sizes stood around the place like humps. An evil aura faintly scattered from the mountains, before enveloping the land. At this moment, this messy and rocky terrain was already filled with a sea of people. Countless eyes looked backwards, as rushing wind sound appeared from all directions. Soon after, hundreds of people covered in a bloody aura appeared in their sights. They are from Dao sect. Some voices immediately sounded as everyone looked at this large group of people. However, there seemed to be a sigh in their tones. Word of the fierce battle between the Dao sect and Yuan Gate disciples had clearly already spread across the entire unique devil region like a whirlwind. Stop! Ying Xiaoxiao suddenly halted at the front of the Dao sect disciples. She waved her hand and cried out in an icy voice. The large number of disciples behind her immediately halted. Alertness surged out in their eyes. A faint and indifferent laughter was suddenly emitted from a mountain to their front when the Dao sect disciples halted. Finally, rushing wind sounds appeared. Numerous figures swept over from all directions. After which, they formed a semicircle that completely blocked the road towards the front. Yuan Kang. Ying Xiaoxiao's eyes were ice-cold as she watched the three individuals standing at the peak of the mountain. Her jade-like fist immediately tightened. It is unexpected that that person still refuses to show himself even after we forced all of you to such an extent. Ha ha, his tolerance is really remarkable. It seems like he has completely lost all the arrogance he showed at the start. However, since he refuses to reveal himself, my fury can only be taken out on all of you. Atop the mountain, Yuan Kang smiled and looked at the Dao sect disciples in the distance. A sinister murderous intent slowly surged in his eyes. A faint evil aura spread across the spacious rocky terrain. At this moment, it seemed as though the air itself had solidified. This spot was not far from the teleportation formation to leave unique devil region. Therefore, it could be considered to be near the end of the great sect competition. However, many people knew that the real show had just begun. Competition was present amongst the 8 super sects of Eastern Xian region. All of them considered each other as opponents. However, they usually exercised some restraint. The only exception was Yuan Gate and Dao sect. As the strongest super sect in Eastern Xian region, the actions of Yuan Gate were naturally a little overbearing. This caused the remaining super sects to feel some dissatisfaction. However, there was nothing they could do. After all, Yuan Gate was simply too powerful and its 3 sect masters were all renowned individuals in Eastern Xian region. Although Dao sect was a little inferior to Yuan Gate, they were still one of the 8 super sects, and their foundations were naturally not weak. There had always been a grudge between these 2 parties. However, the real reason this grudge had grown to such an extent was because of a monstrous genius known as Ju Tong, that Dao sect produced 100 years ago. Outsiders did not really know much about what had happened back then. All they knew was that ever since Dao sect produced that individual called Ju Tong, all the prestige of the younger generation from that time seemed to have accumulated on him. So much so that even Yuan Gate's 3 little kings from that time were all defeated by Ju Tong, and the Yuan Gate disciples were completely dispirited during that great sect competition. Amongst those 3 little kings, 1 had been killed, 1 injured, and the last was sent fleeing. That particular great sect competition was likely the one time where the Dao sect disciples felt the proudest. Although they had paid a significant price, it was not worth mentioning when compared to the losses suffered by Yuan Gate. Something else seemed to have occurred after the competition. Suddenly, a shocking news spread. The Dao sect disciple, Ju Tong, had charged into Yuan Gate alone, killed 3 great elders of Yuan Gate and turned the place upside down. Finally, he directly forced a Yuan Gate sect master to put aside his pride and take action. Only then was Ju Tong killed. This matter had undoubtedly stirred an earth-shattering commotion in Eastern Xian region at that time. Everyone was stunned by Ju Tong's boldness and ferocity. Just how strong must one be in order to do something as earth-shaking as charging into the Yuan Gate headquarters alone? Ju Tong's death had also stirred the fury of Dao sect. At that time, Ju Tong undoubtedly possessed an extremely respected position in the hearts of the Dao sect disciples. Hence, when news that he was killed by a Yuan Gate sect master reached Dao sect, the Dao sect disciples were completely furious. Cries of revenge rose within the sect. At that time, Yuan Gate and Dao sect were at the brink of a war. Everyone were clearly aware of just how tragic it would be when two super sects waged a war. However, the war ultimately did not erupt. Under the suppression of Dao sect master Ying Xuanzi and some of the upper echelons, this matter ultimately died down. However, bone-deep hatred would not diminish with the flow of time. Instead, it would only burrow deeper into one's heart. Hence, a war between Yuan Gate and Dao sect might not have occurred, but the relationship between both parties was quite terrible. This had resulted in both parties being unable to be at peace each time they met in subsequent great sect competitions. An example was the last great sect competition. The Yuan Gate disciples still attacked despite Dao sect admitting defeat. They surrounded and killed the great senior sister of Sky Hall back then, Wang Yang's blood sister. These grudges and enmity accumulated again and again, until now. Many people in the sky and on the mountains did not belong to Yuan Gate or Dao sect. They watched the familiar face-off in the distant rocky terrain, as all of them sighed quietly. It seemed like this great sect competition was destined not to be a peaceful one. However, they wondered if Dao sect would become as miserable as they had been in the past. The Dao sect disciples stared at the Yuan Gate disciples in an unfriendly manner while everyone else looked on. Those eyes of the Dao sect disciples contained a rich hatred. Ying Xiaoxiao's face was frosty as she watched the situation in front of her and clenched her hand tightly. She was aware that the so-called peaceful passing was no longer possible. A great battle between both parties was inevitable. Yuan Kang, it is merely a great sect competition. There is no need to do things in such a manner, right? Chen Gui frowned. He looked at Yuan Kang in the distant sky and spoke in a deep voice. Ha ha, I did not wish for things to develop to this extent as well. However, I cannot stop the repeated provocations of some individuals. If I do not resort to such means, others might think that our Yuan Gate is easily bullied. Yuan Kang softly chuckled. However, since you, Chen Gui, has spoken, I must give you some face. As long as they are willing to surrender Lindong and let us punish him, we will not attack them. What do you say? In your dreams? Ying Huan's pretty face was immediately covered in frost as she cried out coldly. Senior brother Chen Gui, why bother wasting words with him? Hand over brother Lindong? I might as well hand you over. Qingtan rolled her eyes at Chen Gui and said. Chen Gui helplessly let out a bitter laugh. I am not the one who asked to hand over brother Lindong. His gaze once again looked towards Yuan Kang after his words sounded. He spread his hands and said, looks like there is nothing to discuss then. Humph, you truly do not know how to appreciate kindness. Ying Xiaoxiao, you should be aware of the hefty price your Dao sect will have to pay in an all-out battle. Are you certain that you are willing to do this for Lindong? Lei Qian laughed coldly. Who do you think you are? You want my Dao sect to pay a hefty price? I don't believe that your side will end up any better. Wang Yang's eyes turned dark and chilly as he cried out. Even a defeated foe dares to act so arrogant. It looks like your lucky escape last time has caused your confidence to soar significantly, huh? Lei Qian stared at Wang Yang and laughed ferociously. You can come and try me. Wang Yang's face was filled with ferocity. Majestic Yuan power spread from his body. His strength was actually far stronger than an ordinary expert at the peak of the 9 Yuan Nirvana stage. There seemed to be some vague traces of life qi mixed within it. Over this period of time, Wang Yang and Ying Xiaoxiao had refined the profound life pill, and a faint life qi was born within their bodies. This enabled them to touch the door to the profound life stage. They were much stronger than before. You have actually improved a little. However, with just this faint bit of life qi, you still do not possess the qualification to act so arrogantly before me. Lei Qian had clearly also sensed that Wang Yang had become much stronger. However, he still laughed coldly and ridiculed. What do you say now? The foldable fan in Little Spirit King Lingzhen's hand fanned gently. The corners of his mouth formed an icy smile as he watched the Dao sect disciples. After which, he looked towards Yuan Kang and inquired. What do I say? Since they refused to hand that person over, they should not blame us for being merciless. Yuan Kang replied faintly. There was a rich murderous intent surging in his eyes as he spoke. They had suffered multiple losses at Lindong's hands during this great sect competition. Even the pure Yuan treasure that they had originally obtained in the Burning Sky ancient stash was lost because of Lindong's interference. If it was not because they were quick to flee, it was likely that they would have been killed by the red-robed person. Such a loss was clearly difficult for the extremely proud Yuan Kang to endure. Moreover, the Dao sect disciples had always been beaten until they no longer had spirit by Yuan Gate during the past great sect competitions. If any accident occurred this time, it was likely that even their reputation amongst the Yuan Gate disciples would be damaged. In that case, let's do it. The icy smile on Ling Zhen's mouth became even wider when he heard this. He was already anxiously waiting to see the panic and hopeless expressions on these Dao sect disciples. Yuan Kang smiled indifferently. After which, the three of them slowly stepped forward as majestic Yuan power surged out. In an instant, it appeared as though all the Yuan power in the area had vaguely started to boil. The surrounding onlookers felt their hearts pound a little harder when they watched this scene. They knew that Yuan Gate was about to attack. Chen Gui let out a deep breath. After which, he stared at Yuan Kang and took a step forward. I will stop Yuan Kang. Thank you, brother Chen Gui. Ying Xiaoxiao felt some gratitude when she heard this. Lindong was currently not around. All they could do was rely on Chen Gui to stop Yuan Kang. News of the situation here has already spread throughout the entire unique devil region. Lindong should have received it. As long as we hold on, he will be able to hurry here. Chen Gui hesitated for a moment but still ended up nodding. He had seen Lindong's battle with Lei Qian. The former was indeed quite powerful. However, there was still quite a big gap when compared to Yuan Kang. Hence, he did not really understand the confidence underlying Ying Xiaoxiao's group. Nevertheless, he did not say anything more despite his incomprehension. I will deal with Lei Qian. Wang Yang held a heavy black sword in his hand and grunted. Ying Xiaoxiao nodded. After which, she raised her head. Her eyes contained some chilliness as they locked onto the little spirit king Ling Zhen. She said, leave Ling Zhen to me. Huan Huan, Qing Yi, the two of you will lead the other Dao sect disciples and stop the remaining Yuan Gate disciples. Ying Huan Huan and Qing Yi nodded heavily. The former extended her jade-like hand as the crimson heavenly phoenix zither appeared with a flash. My fellow disciples. Ying Xiaoxiao slowly inhaled a breath of air that seemed to have become icy cold because of the tense atmosphere. Her eyes rotated and swept over all the Dao sect disciples' faces. Please strengthen our Dao sect. Wild excitement surged into the eyes of all the Dao sect disciples at this moment. At the same time, an unusually deep roar resounded in an orderly fashion. Strengthen our Dao sect. An unusually intense feeling suddenly began to spread after the roar from the Dao sect disciples resounded over the rocky terrain. Countless pairs of eyes from the surroundings gathered on these Dao sect disciples. Their faces did not contain even the slightest fear even though they were about to face Yuan Gate. Instead, there was a concentrated craziness. Under this craziness, surged a hatred that was difficult to conceal. Yuan Kang looked at the spirited Dao sect disciples in the distance. The corners of his mouth lifted into a mocking smile. Soon after, he waved his hand in an indifferent manner. Do it. Bang! His voice had just faded when several majestic Yuan power fluctuation began to erupt from the black mass of Yuan Gate disciples behind him. Gazes that contained unfriendliness locked onto their front one by one. The 6 great spirit generals of Yuan Gate were the first to rush forward from behind Yuan Kang. Behind them, the Yuan Gate disciples closely followed like floodwater. Charge! Qing Yi's eyes were red as he watched the floodwater-like Yuan Gate disciples surging forward, as a deep roar emerged from his throat. In the next moment, his body had already taken the lead to charge forward. Boom! The hostile atmosphere of the place shattered following the charge from the red-eyed disciples from both sides. Thick murderous intent and sounds of fighting rose towards the sky. The countless surrounding gazes contained some seriousness and shock as they watched the two torrents that screamed forward. In the next moment, the torrents collided with a bang before their eyes. Bang! Monstrous killing aura spread upon their collision. After which, vast and mighty Yuan power wildly unfurled. Numerous powerful martial arts were unleashed in an instant. Finally, they ruthlessly collided against the enemies in front. There was no longer any mercy at this moment. All their attacks sought blood. The Yuan Kang trio watched the torrents collide together with cold and indifferent faces. After which, they stepped on the air and slowly walked forward. The torrent automatically spread apart before them. Chen Gui, Ying Xiaoxiao and Wang Yang stared at the Yuan Kang trio from afar. They also inhaled a deep breath. Soon after, their bodies moved, transforming into rays of light as they rushed out. You deal with Chen Gui? There should be no problem, right? Currently, many people think that you cannot handle him. Ling Zhen smiled teasingly at Yuan Kang and said, there will no longer be anyone who believes such things in future. Yuan Kang indifferently replied, leave Wang Yang to me. This time around, I will not allow him to escape. Lei Qian sinisterly looked at Wang Yang and said, in that case, I will deal with Ying Xiaoxiao. It is unfortunate that such a beauty would have to be destroyed. Truly a regretful matter. Ling Zhen fanned the foldable fan in his hand and said with a smirk, stop uttering nonsense. Attack and finish them off quickly. Yuan Kang frowned slightly and lightly shouted. His body shot out, transforming into a ray of light that blocked Chen Gui. Next, Ling Zhen and Lei Qian moved at the same time and appeared in front of Ying Xiaoxiao and Wang Yang respectively. Wang Yang, in a moment I will see if you still have the face to act arrogantly before me. Lei Qian stood in Wang Yang's way. The savage smile on his face grew increasingly wider as he mocked. Wang Yang's eyes were dark and cold. His hand slowly gripped the heavy black sword tightly. After which, his body suddenly rushed out. An after-image appeared, containing a sharp evil sword aura as it pierced towards Lei Qian's throat at lightning speed. Humph! Lei Qian let out a cold snort when he saw this. He clenched his hand and a silver lightning blade appeared. He did not dodge Wang Yang's attack. Instead, he took a step forward and furiously threw a blade glow. A clear metallic sound suddenly unfurled in the air along with sparks and a wild wind. Two figures were instantly engaged in a life-and-death battle. Ha ha, such anxiousness. Ling Zhen watched the two individuals who unleashed lethal attacks the moment they met, and could not help but smile. Soon after, he grinned and gazed at Ying Xiaoxiao, before speaking in a polite and refined manner, I am Ling Zhen. I have long heard of the name of the great senior sister of the Dao sect Sky Hall, Ying Xiaoxiao. Today? However, he had yet to finish his sentence when Ying Xiaoxiao had already rushed forward with a 3-foot sword in her hand. The pointed sword mercilessly attacked the fatal spots on Ling Zhen's body. Oh, you are even more anxious, Ling Zhen chuckled. However, this smile was a little dark and cold. He whirled the foldable fan in his hand, and it grew to several times its original size while emitting a glow. Like a shield, it blocked all of the sword attacks that were rushing over. In that case, don't blame me for ruthlessly picking a flower, Ling Zhen narrowed his eyes. A cold light flashed across them. He laughed softly as his body turned into a light figure that rushed forth. The foldable fan pressed gently on the empty air. A sinisterly cold wind directly tore through the air and blasted at Ying Xiaoxiao. A grave expression flashed across Ying Xiaoxiao's eyes when she saw this. The Yuan power within her body circulated at its maximum as she stepped forward to face the attack. As the fires of battle burned all around, two figures stood at the most central area. The two figures faced each other at a distance of less than 10 feet. An extremely shocking fluctuation spread out from both of their bodies. This fluctuation practically surpassed everyone else present. These two figures were naturally Chen Gui and Yuan Kang. The surrounding gazes penetrated through the chaotic fights and gathered onto these two individuals. Both of them were extremely renowned younger generation members in the Eastern Xian region. One was an imposing and formidable individual who was ranked first on the sect's wanted list, while the other was the leader of the Yuan Gate's 3 Little Kings. Both of them possessed a monstrous talent and were extremely powerful. It was rumored that they had even reached the initial profound life stage. Forget about the younger generation, their strength allowed them to be ranked amongst the experts even within the entire Eastern Xian region. There was a diverse opinion on which of the two was stronger. The two of them had once exchanged blows, but they did not fight with their full strength. That outcome could only be considered a draw. Hence, many people were undoubtedly extremely curious about the battle between the two. They truly wished to find out who amongst these two renowned younger generation members was the stronger one. You should not have intervened in the matter between our Yuan Gate and Dao sect. Yuan Kang looked at Chen Gui in front of him. Subsequently, he glanced at the battle that had erupted over this place. However, he was not anxious to fight and spoke with an indifferent tone. "Haha, I can do whatever I want without asking for your opinion." The ghost mask-wearing Chen Gui appeared rather ghastly as he replied with a slight chuckle. Since he was able to become the #1 individual on the sect's wanted list, he was clearly no ordinary person. Others might be afraid of Yuan Kang, but he was not. Yuan Kang involuntarily shook his head when he heard this. The cold aura in his eyes slowly became colder. "Back then, we had a brief and hurried fight, and I really have not gotten enough of it. Since we have met today, let's end it. I will be happy to accompany you," Chen Gui said. Yuan Kang smiled indifferently. He slowly spread out his hands. Immediately, waves of extremely shocking Yuan power surged out from his body like floodwater. That vast and mighty power directly turned into a churning wave behind him, as it rumbled in the sky. Chen Gui's eyes flashed when he saw this. Monstrous grayish-black Yuan power that was filled with a dark yin aura surged out from his body and transformed into a monstrous cloud. Both of them had reached the initial profound life stage. That vast and mighty Yuan power was undoubtedly many times stronger than the other disciples. "Trust me, you will regret your decision today." Yuan Kang slowly clenched his hand. An extremely simple black metal sword flashed and appeared. He stared at Chen Gui, as an unusual glow flickered within his eyes. "It is perhaps a little too early to say such words." Chen Gui clenched his hand. A black sawtooth blade with ghost patterns appeared in his hand. The large blade was lifted, and pointed towards Yuan Kang in the distance as he faintly smiled. "Do it. Allow me to witness just what level the leader of the Yuan Gate's 3 little kings has reached." Yuan Kang stared at Chen Gui. The corners of his mouth slowly lifted to form a sinister arc. In the next instant, an afterimage appeared, while his body turned into a shadow that rushed out. Monstrous Yuan power whistled out in a flash. A shocking face-off had instantly begun. This video will end here.